You're listening to the Morning Report on WOC News Talk 1420. The case of Chris Benoit, he murdered his wife, his son, took his own life nearly a year ago. As this one has dropped out of mainstream sight, there's still at least one man out there who's following this case and still breaking news on it. And that is Irvin Muchnick, who joins us this morning. He's the author of Wrestling Babylon. And Irvin, nobody's covered this story as well as you have.
Well, thanks a lot, Sean. Thanks for having me.
Now, there's the latest breaking news, and it's all about the timeline. When did the WWE know that Chris Benoit had murdered his wife, Nancy, and his young son, and when they went on with this tribute show that night? This seems now to be in terribly, terribly bad taste.
Yes, ironically, at the time, last June, I was cast as the apologist for WWE when I was on shows like The O'Reilly Factor and MSNBC's Live with Dan Abrams, simply because I resisted a rush to judgment. But the evidence is clear now from records from the Fayette County Sheriff's Office and from my sources that Vince McMahon, the chairman of World Wrestling Entertainment, clearly knew when he went on the air on Monday night, June 25th, 2007, with a tribute show to Chris Benoit, that he wasn't the victim but was the perpetrator of this heinous crime. And the way we know this is from Chris Benoit's father, Michael Benoit, outside Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, who was notified on Friday afternoon and was told that it was murder-suicide. Dave Meltzer, the publisher of the Wrestling Observer newsletter, which is the leading newsletter in the wrestling industry, also got a call from someone who had heard from a WWE executive hours before Monday Night Raw went on the air. Now, Meltzer didn't believe it because he didn't think Chris Benoit was capable of such a horrible deed, but there's really no doubt at all at this point that WWE knew.
Now, let's run down the timeline of that weekend, because Chris Benoit that weekend was to take part in a WWE pay-per-view. He was going to wrestle for the title. He no-showed that show. And then these strange text messages started rolling in to his friends in the WWE, which led to the next day one of WWE's security calling 911 to do a check.
That's correct, but there are a lot of questions about the timeline that WWE has published. Mm-hmm. Benoit no-showed not one but two shows that weekend. He failed to show up on Saturday night in Beaumont, Texas, and had talked to a lot of people in the company about the fact that he had overslept, another was that his wife and his son had food poisoning, and the upshot was that he was told to forget about the Saturday night show in Beaumont, Texas, but make sure that he was rested up and in Houston for the big pay-per-view show, Vengeance, in Houston on Sunday night, where, incidentally, Chris Benoit was scheduled to win the ECW title. So he had a very important spot on the show. Mm-hmm. But early Sunday morning, starting around 4 a.m., he sent a series of mysterious text messages to two other wrestlers saying the dogs are in the enclosed area in the backyard and the side garage door is open. What is unbelievable about the WWE timeline is that they say that WWE executives did not become aware of these text messages from very early in the morning on Sunday until 12:30 p.m. on Monday, at which point they notified the authorities down there and called 911. We don't know what was going on in those 36 hours, but if in fact they were sitting on the information, they would have been motivated to try to save the pay-per-view show on Sunday night. They would have been motivated to try to hold off the news that Benoit was a murderer so they could get through Monday Night Raw. And I think most important of all, it has nothing to do with taste. They knew that this story was going to focus unprecedented scrutiny on the pro wrestling industry for its incredible pandemic of early deaths of young athletes in their 20s, 30s, and 40s in the last generation. There were Benoit and his wife Nancy were two of 21 wrestling personalities who died under the age of 50 in the year 2007.
Now, some would call it exceptionally cynical to think that the WWE, as something you intimate here, that these tribute shows had done quite well in the ratings in the past. going
That's
ahead
right.
with it Monday night. But some would say it's in bad taste, but are extraordinarily cynical. But we are dealing with professional wrestling, and it's hard not to be cynical when you're dealing with this industry.
That's right. It's really par for the course. In 1999, Owen Hart, at the beginning of a pay-per-view show before they went on the air, died in a stunt fall from the rafters of the Kemper Arena in Kansas City, and they went ahead with the show and then did a tribute the next night on Monday Night Raw. In 1997, Brian Pillman was found dead in a hotel room in Minnesota just before a big pay-per-view started. They went ahead with the show. They did a tribute the next night on Monday Night Raw. And in 2005, Eddie Guerrero was found dead, also in Minnesota. And there was a highly rated tribute show on Raw shortly thereafter. So this is an industry that plays on the blurring of the lines between fantasy and reality, and is always ready to exploit a real-life tragedy to bend the minds of its audience and to ratchet up interest.
This is a rather extraordinary story, and basically what it comes down to is that the timeline that the WWE put out there was a lie. That Sunday morning, these text messages warning of possible problems with Chris Benoit had come in, and that the WWE did nothing, and it may have, in fact, hidden this story until the next day.
Right. I'm not ready to make that accusation directly at this point because we don't know what those wrestlers told to what people.
Right.
But I would say it's totally absurd and not at all credible that these two wrestlers, who, by the way, their names are Chavo Guerrero. Chavo is the nephew of Eddie Guerrero, one of Chris Benoit's best friends. Chavo Guerrero and another really ex-wrestler who's now a referee named Scott James. It's not believable that they told nobody while their good friend who had sent them weird messages was no-showing 2 straight nights, the second of which was a big pay-per-view. So I wouldn't be surprised if the WWE timeline was legalistically vetted before they published it at their website. WWE is a huge publicly traded company. It has lots of lawyers and lots of people who take care of PR. So I wouldn't be surprised if Vince McMahon himself was somehow in the paperwork protected from, quote, knowing when he was on the air at 8 p.m. Eastern Time on Monday night with his eyes blurred with tears and his voice quaking, saying Chris Benoit and his wife and son were dead, and we're doing a tribute show. So I can't make a direct accusation, but certainly this story smells.
Right.
And if the congressional investigators who showed some interest in looking into the wrestling industry want to take a look at something, this is a good place to start.
And again, we spoke of cynicism before. This industry just invites it. Thank you, Irvin. We appreciate your time. Your current book is called Wrestling Babylon. You've got another book coming up next year on this the case of Chris Benoit. We're looking forward to that one as well. Thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you, Sean.